Why is there a trend of using adjectives to name horror movies? I mean, why can't we just have something called bad? Sinister is directed by Scott Derrickson, written by him and C. Robert Cargill, and stars Ethan Hawke, Juliet Rylance, and James Ransone. And Sinister is about this guy, Ellison Oswalt, played by Ethan Hawke, who is this struggling writer. He had this big hit like 10 years ago, and he's just desperate to get another hit. So he moves himself and his family to this new house where this crime took place, but his family doesn't know that. And he writes true crime, so he wants to use these murders to influence his own writing, and when he starts to learn more about the murders, it starts to maybe mess with him. Now, to be completely honest, my primary interest in seeing this movie was because the co-writer of this movie, C. Robert Cargill, used to be on this movie podcast I listened to, Spill.com, which is no longer active, but he was Carlisle from Spill.com. It's just really cool to see like an internet guy actually go on to make movies. And I thought Sinister was a really interesting movie. Like, there's a disappointing supernatural twist thing near the end, but there's lots of atmosphere in this movie, and Ethan Hawke can carry anything. First of all, this is a really good looking movie. The cinematography from Christopher Noor is crisp and seems to intentionally use excessive darkness to disorient the viewer. And a big part of this movie is the fact that Ellison finds this box of Super 8 footage that provides evidence for the murders taking place, and he watches the Super 8 footage, and it's really creepy. It's really grainy. It really looks like it came from the past. It feels like you're watching a snuff film. And the overall design of the demon that's eventually revealed, Bugul, and the mythology surrounding him is very simple, but in that it's very authentic. The sound in this movie is great as well. It's just so many disturbing, ungodly sounds throughout this movie, but the silences can be just as scary. And the music here by Christopher Young is generally ambient and downbeat, but sometimes there's a groove to it, which ultimately kind of subliminally keeps you hooked despite these disturbing images you're seeing. It's kind of like listening to Nine Inch Nails, honestly. And I don't know why, but when they play the Super 8 footage, like, there seems to be music accompanying it, which I know isn't possible, but oh well. Sinister is a movie dripping with atmosphere, and this is helped along by the editing from Frederick Thoroval, who really cranks up the tension during scenes where Ellison is just walking around or investigating. And speaking of Ellison, he's an extremely interesting protagonist because he's not a good guy. He's an obsessed, desperate man who is putting the lives and comfort of his family on the line just so, he can make another big hit. Ethan Hawke plays Ellison, and he can do anything and sell it. He's great in this movie. He makes sure to portray Ellison as someone who's still scared out of his mind. He's not a tough guy, but his desperation makes him push forward. Juliet Rylance plays his wife, Tracy, and you can tell that she's constantly on the verge of just wanting to scream at her husband, but she wants to forgive him, she wants to understand him. And James Ransone plays the unnamed deputy who helps Ellison with his investigation, and he's very much needed comedic relief. He's really good. And you can tell from this movie that Scott Derrickson's strength really is in the procedural and dramatic aspects of this movie. There's a sense of mobility with his camera, and I think this is best seen in my opinion, the best scene in the movie is this one-shot scene where it's 2 minutes long and it's just Ellison and Tracy arguing, and it's cool how he positions the camera at first on one side where it's all dark and they're arguing, then eventually he moves it to the other side where it's bright and they've stopped arguing. It's really cool. That's all about the things I didn't like about the movie. For one, a lot of the scares here are unfortunately cheap jump scares that don't stay with the characters. They're just loud sounds accompanied by scary images, which is sad because the atmosphere was so good, but the payoff not so much. This movie is also almost 2 hours long, which is kind of long because some of the investigating can get repetitive without necessarily escalating things. But my biggest issue with the movie was that honestly, my interest deflated as soon as the lore started getting introduced about Bugul, because, I was kind of hoping for it to really just be like a serial killer behind all these things, but the way they delivered the exposition was just like all at once, so it was too much to take in. And despite this movie's really strong opening, the ending is kind of a downer because there's no fulfillment for any of the characters. It really just kind of ends. But I will still say that Sinister is an okay movie. I think it's definitely more for fans of supernatural stuff. Don't go into it like me thinking it was going to be a true crime thing. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Sinister. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.